Hello and welcome into Locked On Wolves on this Friday. It's a packed show today, from a press conference this week introducing some new Timberwolves and reintroducing some members already on the Timberwolves roster that have re-signed contracts, to an ESPN article basically predicting the finish of the Western Conference from some of their experts, as well as basically over-under totals. And I'll give my thoughts on why I disagree with where they have the Wolves ranked in the Western Conference, as well as high points from the press conference this week and plenty of other things that have happened. Lots of news and notes on this Friday. Welcome into a packed show on Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm also the editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site on the FanSided network. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome into the show. A reminder that Fridays on Locked On NBA, you can listen to Locked On NBA, and you'll get to hear Nick Angstead of Locked On Mavericks and Adam Morris of Locked On Nuggets. They power rank the week that was in the NBA. Follow the Locked On NBA podcast today wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy Friday, everybody. Again, packed show today. Lots to talk about. The Timberwolves had a press conference this week introducing some new members of the organization, as well as reintroducing Jared Vanderbilt, Jordan McLaughlin. And there's some key quotes from that I want to run through today, some key things that came up. Also, Karl-Anthony Towns gave an interview to Mark Carman over on FanSided. Of course, I write for Dunking with Wolves of FanSided. So I want to go through a few of those conversation points from the interview between Kat and Mark Carman. And then also ESPN had a piece on predictions for this year at the Western Conference finish based on some voting that their experts did at ESPN. The Wolves are a lot lower than they should be. So I want to get into that here a little bit as well. That'll be the show today. A reminder that you can follow and subscribe to this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's for free. Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, of course, the all-new Odyssey app. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves. That's Locked On T-Wolves, don't forget the T, and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, CKEN. Also, a reminder, we're on YouTube. This is the end of our third week on YouTube. I think this is like episode 9. So if you're not already watching on YouTube, or if you're not already subscribed, please do so. New channel, so could use all the likes, subscribes, views, whatever you can do on YouTube would be awesome. All right, let's go ahead and start with the press conference conversation. What went down this week. So the Wolves, basically, they were reintroducing Jordan McLaughlin, Jared Vanderbilt, each of them signing multi-year extensions with the Wolves officially earlier this week. We're a week past now when this was reported in the media towards the end of last week. So I think it was like Friday night last week. So they were reintroduced. Taurean Prince, of course, was acquired on draft day, leading into the draft several weeks ago. He was introduced. Then also Patrick Beverley. And Beverly was kind of the headliner, and rightfully so. I think Taurean Prince is a nice rotational piece. Patrick Beverley's a legit, second team all NBA defense type guy. I talked a lot about him on the show, in the immediate aftermath of the trade, again, more recently. But I thought, interestingly, one of the focuses, and also Leandro Bolmaro, obviously, he was also part of this too. Beverly was still kind of the guy who got most of the headlines following, the write-ups in local media, etc., because of his comments, of course, and talked about this too before, that he's never missed the playoffs in his entire career, first with Houston, then with the Clippers. And of course, he said he doesn't plan to now. Obviously, right, nobody's going to say, yeah, well, that streak might come to an end. So shouldn't have been a headline, but there we go. And talked a lot about defense, and it makes sense. That's Patrick Beverley's calling card. We know that. And what he brings, the edge he's going to bring to the Timberwolves defensively, and the defensive skills is massive, is massively important. One of the quotes, this is transcribed by Chris Hine at the Star Tribune. He said, Rosas, this is reading directly from Chris's piece at the Star Trib. He says, Rosas said it is hard to swing a deal for a player like Beverly, who, quote, can change the whole defense. That's Rosas's portion. The Wolves hope he can have a big impact on raising their defensive rating from 28th last season. Rosas said, quote, we have to change the culture, change the environment, and we have a guy that has the urgency, that fights, that'll do whatever it takes to make sure we're successful. And I've talked about that on the show quite a bit. There's so many different layers to it. Number one, Beverly competes, right? He plays hard. And that's a huge part of the battle. Believe it or not, in the NBA, that's a huge part of the battle, is carrying on the defensive end of the floor and playing hard. The other piece, of course, is the knowledge, right, of timing, spacing. And actually, Beverly talked about that. I'll get to his quote here in a minute. Understanding where you need to be and when, and playing hard. And then there's also the physical tools. I mean, Beverly's not huge. He's got a nice wingspan, and, you know, for a point guard, he's not super undersized, but he's not a big guard, right? So that's the only piece he's a little bit missing, and he's on the wrong side of 30 now, and he gets hurt. He's been hurt quite a bit in his career. So that's the only downside, but nobody plays harder than Patrick Beverley. Nobody gets under that's another maybe underrated piece of defense, is getting under guys' skin, just being obnoxious. Beverley does that to the point occasionally of being accused of being a dirty player. But if he plays hard and plays tough and plays with an edge and knows where he needs to be and when, that's massively important for the Timberwolves and for any team that Beverly's been on. There's a reason why his teams get to the playoffs every year, because he is so good on the defensive end of the floor. I want to read Pat Bev's quote. He talked about becoming students of the game. He says, quote, it's important to, quote, understand what's going on, understand positioning, understand spacing, understand timing. And once you understand those things, you're a student of the game, and then you're able to become a teacher. When you're able to teach the defense or teach that position, you put yourself in the position to be successful defensively. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, how often do I talk about, I can answer this all the time. I talk about positioning, spacing, timing. All those things are so important on both ends of the floor. But if there's a player that already understands that and has that baseline, I mean, that's such a big piece of being a good defender in the NBA, and also being a good all-around offensive player, is knowing where you need to be and when. And Beverly is a master at that, really on both ends of the floor, but especially defensively. And he talks in this article about, you know, making sure that they're consistent, that they get locked in. You could control some of those more cliche types of things. But the timing and spacing piece is so important. And the fact that Beverly is somebody who not only understands that, but can execute it and can also articulate to teammates, hey, this is the expectation. This is how you need to play defense at the NBA level, is very important. So if you missed the press conference, go back and watch it. I think the Wolves put it out on social media in its entirety. I think it's probably also on Timberwolves.com. Some good write-ups out there. Chris Hine from the Star Tribunes was really great. But the key, I guess one other thing was, Rosas talked a little bit about Leandro Bolmaro being basically the Latin version of Mr. 94 Feet, the Argentinian version of Mr. 94 Feet, which is, of course, Patrick Beverley's nickname, because he picks up full court defense. He plays hard. He's competitive. You look at the guys the Wolves brought in, the roster is largely the same. And a guy in Ricky Rubio, who's a good defender, a great team defender, plays hard, cares. He's gone, but you bring in a guy like Beverly, who's a better version of Rubio defensively, and Bolmaro, who the Wolves don't have anybody like Bolmaro on the defensive end of the floor. McDaniel's going to get more minutes. Vanderbilt's back. That's four guys right there with the defensive edge. They're going to play hard defensively. Vanderbilt, McDaniels, Bolmaro, and Beverly. Add Josh Okogie. Suddenly 5 of your top 11 guys on this roster, 12 guys maybe, are very likely plus defenders at the NBA level. And if nothing else, they have size and they play hard. And those things really, really matter. And I'll allude, or I'll call back on this later in the episode when I want to talk about the Western Conference predictions, which, I mean, well, that's a conversation for later in the show today. But the press conference had this theme of of defense and effort and consistency. Whether it was Rosas or Beverly were the guys that echoed it the most. But Chris Finch talked a little bit about it as well, and the defensive versatility of guys, and the 3 and the 4 being basically the same. And in today's NBA, the position you play is basically equals the position that you're guarding defensively, right? Because the offensive pieces are so interchangeable, especially in Finch's system. But anyway, it's fascinating. Go back and watch that or listen to it if you can. But get excited about Patrick Beverley, Leandro Bolmaro, especially defensively, this season for the Wolves. It's going to be a ton of fun. Next, I want to get into the Towns interview. I want to talk about a couple of other quick notes, and then get into the NBA predictions thing on ESPN, because if you're not watching on YouTube, I think every time I say that, I roll my eyes. So if you want to see that, subscribe on the YouTube, and you'll see how I really feel about these ESPN predictions. But I'll get into that here in a second. First, let's talk about our great friends at Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar of all time. It tastes exactly like a candy bar. Did you know that Built Bar has over 9 delicious flavors? There's 9 staple flavors of those. Mint brownie, coconut, cookies, and cream are all fantastic. And again, it's a protein bar, so it's healthy, but it tastes just like a candy bar. Honestly, it doesn't taste like a typical protein bar. You can get a mix box right now on BuiltBar.com. You'll get 2 of each of the 9 flavors. And not only do they taste the best, they're incredibly healthy. The macros in Built Bar, 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from only 130 per bar up to 180, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and 4 to 5 grams net carbs. Built Bar is also the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team, which is awesome. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. Let's also talk about Sweatblock. Sweatblock, some of our new friends here at Lockdown Wolves, and there's a few things in life that just are not fun to talk about. One of them is sweating excessively. Plenty of people deal with it. I've dealt with it from time to time myself, whether it's public speaking, maybe it's an interview, a speech, first date, whatever it might be. You got to use Sweatblock antiperspirant wipes. Sweatblock is stronger and more effective than most clinical antiperspirants. You simply apply them at night before bedtime, go to bed, and the next morning you'll wake up, wash, go about your day without worrying about sweat. Guaranteed. I know it sounds too good to be true, but you literally only have to use Sweatblock once, maybe twice a week. It'll keep you dry the entire week. No more pitting out, no more picking your shirt based on which one will hide sweat better. Sweatblock wipes are doctor created and doctor recommended. They work for up to 7 days per use. Seriously, I tried it last week for the first time, 2 weeks ago, maybe for the first time. And, 1 wipe per week is good. You're good to go. Dry shirt guarantee. If Sweatblock doesn't keep you dry, you can get your money back. This has even been featured and tested on the Rachel Ray Show by firefighters. Currently, it's #1 on Amazon in the antiperspirant category. You can wear whatever you want to wear. It'll be your little secret to confidence. It's a must-have for everyone's toiletry bag. If it's a big presentation, a hot date, whatever it might be, everyone can benefit. If you or someone you love is dealing with excessive sweating, you have to check out Sweatblock. Get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code LOCKEDON. Again, promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off at sweatblock.com. You can also get it on Amazon or CVS. But again, I recommend going to sweatblock.com, promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get 20% off. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other quick Wolves notes. First, Karl-Anthony Towns did an interview with Mark Carman, who's the video person over at FanSided.com. And it was about a 15-minute interview, really kind of all about the offseason. They spend kind of the first part of the offseason, or excuse me, first part of the interview talking about the hardships that Towns and his family have gone through, the tragic passing of his mother, Jackie, early in 2020 due to complications from COVID-19. They talk about that, his relationship with his mom, his relationship with his dad, how that's changed and how it's stayed the same, and how his overall approach both to life and then on and off the court. And Cat talks a lot about giving back, and it's truly, Cat's always genuine, but in this interview, he's really genuine about giving back to the community. And it's not just money, but it's time, and it's quality time he talks about, which I think is really cool and really important. So that's kind of the first part of the interview. The second part they get into, Towns says, of course, I think we'll make the playoffs this year. I hope we make the playoffs. What more do you want me to say? Talk a little bit about how much he liked Allen Iverson growing up. He mentions working out with Aaron Rodgers, Packers quarterback, in the offseason. He talks about Patrick Beverley's impact. Mark Carman asked him about Patrick Beverley and what he can bring to the team. Towns talks about working on his body, wants to play in both the post and from outside the arc. It's really a wide-ranging, about a 15-minute interview. So go check that out on fansided.com. And I'm going to have a write-up at Dunking with Wolves on some of the high points from it as well here in the coming days. So go check out that interview. And then one other random note that I thought was fascinating. This is something that came up a few months ago, or I guess really kind of right towards the beginning of last season, which was like in December. So I guess really a few months ago, believe it or not, the start of last season. And that's this idea of $1 million tournament in season. And by that, I mean $1 million per player. This is just more of an overall NBA note. And I wanted to just kind of talk through it because I think it's interesting. The report was initially like a year-ish ago, almost a year ago, or I guess it was more towards the beginning of the pandemic. It's been out there for a while. Adrian Wojnarowski had an initial report many months back about the idea that the league could do a midseason tournament, and that there could be player compensation as a way to get guys up for this tournament, right? Because most players would rather have time off than get paid, $50,000 or whatever for playing in a tournament. So the NBA is proposing the idea of, could this be $1 million per player on the team that wins this midseason tournament. And the idea of an in-season tournament has been around for a long time. Bill Simmons over at The Ringer has been talking about it way back when he wrote for Grantland, and probably even before that, ESPN.com. He wrote about the idea of like, could you have an in-season play-in where the winner is guaranteed a playoff spot, or maybe it's an immediate postseason play-in before the real playoffs start. Obviously, now we've got an abbreviated version of that. But could there just be like basically an exhibition tournament where the guys that win, the players on the team that win, get cash? And so Shams Charania brought this up again as something that was discussed on a league-wide call this past week. It was the competition committee call, and the purse would be $1 million per player on the team that wins the tournament. There's really no other details out there. I think this is fascinating. To me, the biggest issue would be, and again, we don't know details, but say you have to, it's some sort of, I don't know, it's got to be some sort of like almost March Madness style tournament, one game at a time. You know, I guess you do the whole bracket, but you need like at least a week to complete it, more than that, really, realistically. So, you know, do teams really want to call it a 2-week break in the middle of the season? Because if you don't go deep in this tournament, you're off for 2 weeks, and that's really you got to kind of ramp back up. On the flip side, if you play through the whole thing and you win it, you're going to get a lot less rest than teams that lose at the beginning. So the format, obviously, and those are going to be the biggest hurdles they have to clear, but I'm pretty sure you'll get guys that are willing to play in this thing for $1 million a player. And I think it's a really cool idea and a really kind of a fun twist on the play-in tournament idea, and just to add some fun, especially for like, think of the Timberwolves in almost any other year. Hopefully this year is different, obviously, but no hope by February. But if you have this tournament to look forward to, you never know. You could upset in any single game. You could upset the Nuggets or the Lakers or the Nets or whoever, and then advance to, you know, keep playing in this like mini playoff tournament. I think it's a really fun thing to think about. So keep an eye on that. Obviously, it's not happening this year. I'm sure it wouldn't happen next year. It's probably a couple years down the road, but I think it's a really cool idea. Okay, so next, what I want to talk about is this NBA predictions thing on ESPN. They have win-loss predictions. These are kind of spit out by their summer forecast group that they do. They have a bunch of expert panels that all submit how many wins they think each team will have, and then they average this out to get a projected record. And they did this for the Western Conference a couple days ago on ESPN.com. They have it broken out into the contenders. Their second category is the play-in group. Third category is the bottom 5. And by my tone, you can probably tell which category the Timberwolves are in and how I feel about that. But I want to hit the high points of that and give the reasoning they gave for the Wolves being where they're at. And I'll give my rebuttal as to why I think that this is a gross misrepresentation of where this Wolves team is likely to finish, given relative health, which I think is something you have to assume if you're doing an exercise like this. So we'll get to that here in just a second, and I'll give my candid thoughts. First, though, let's talk about our friends at rockauto.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You have a computer with access to rockauto.com, both at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business. They have been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every single customer, and they have everything you could possibly need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil to even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Let's also talk about betonline.ag. We're back and better than ever. All eyes are on the gridiron now. Teams are back on the field to start another football season. As always, BetOnline is your #1 spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With a new updated site and interface, even more odds, props, and contests than ever before, betonline.ag continues to be the #1 source for everything football. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. That's double your initial deposit just for signing up. Don't forget to use the promo code NFL100. From football to basketball, boxing, right on down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Again, Your initial deposit will be doubled just by signing up with the promo code NFL100. That's over at betonline.ag. Okay, let's talk about this ESPN article. So it's an ESPN Plus article. It's an insider article, so I can't read everything word for word. You need a subscription to access it, but I'll give the breakdown. So the first category is contenders. Utah Jazz, LA Lakers, the Suns, the Nuggets, the Mavs, and the Warriors, all with between 48 and 55 wins. They have the Mavs and Warriors tied at 48 wins at the 5 and 6 position, or positions respectively, I guess. I buy that. I think that's a solid top 6. I think you're the Blazers, not the Blazers, the Clippers would be the other team I would consider, maybe in that same group. Maybe it's a top 7, including the Clippers. I'm on board with that. I think that makes sense. I even think the order is reasonable. Jazz, Lakers, Suns, Nuggets. I maybe, that seems about right. Mavs, Warriors, Clippers. I'm good with that as the top 7. So then at number 8, as part of the play-in group, they've got the Portland Trailblazers. Oh, and to be clear, the Clippers are number 7 on this list as part of the play-in group. I guess that's how you have to divide it up, because 7 through 10 are play-in. But I think the Clippers are a safe 7. You've got the Clippers, Portland Trailblazers, Memphis Grizzlies, and New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans, according to this, again, this is a panel of ESPN experts. They don't give you the full list. Each submitted how many wins they thought each team would get. The Pelicans came out at 37 and 45 with the 10 seed in the West. 37-win team, 8 games under 500 in this poll at the 10 seed. Okay. I'll present that without comment. So the Pelicans at 10. The next group is the bottom 5. The Sacramento Kings at number 11 with 35 wins. The San Antonio Spurs at number 12 with 34 wins. The Timberwolves at number 13 in the West, 31 wins. The Rockets and Thunder tied a distant 14th/15th, 22 wins, 9 games behind the Wolves. So there's a few things about this that are crazy. Number one, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, how do you put the Kings and the Spurs ahead of the Timberwolves? You can make an argument for the Pelicans. I don't think there's a coherent argument that the Kings and Spurs are going to be better than the Wolves this year, barring, again, you have to assume, median injury luck this year, right? Or bad luck, I guess. You can't assume injuries. Remember, if the Wolves didn't have the injury issues last year, this is very likely close to a 500 team. You could argue the roster's improved this offseason by swapping out, Rubio and Culver and Hernan Gomez for Beverly, Prince, Bolmaro, right? So how is this team 4 games worse than the Kings, 6 games worse than the Pelicans? I you could even argue that the Wolves are going to be, I think the Wolves and Grizzlies are going to be battling it out for like this, in the 8-9 range, right? That's where I think they'll end up. And again, no official win prediction yet. I'm holding off on that for a little while still. I'm reserving the right to wait on making that call. But if you're a regular listener, I think the Wolves are going to be in the 7-10 range. And I think very likely they'll be 8 or 9 battling with the Grizzlies. I think they finish ahead of the Pelicans. But I can buy the argument that the Pelicans are 10 and the Wolves are 11. What I cannot wrap my mind around for the life of me is how you'd put the Kings and Spurs ahead of the Wolves. A Wolves team with Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, and some of these new pieces. I just don't understand it. And then, Rockets and Thunder at 14 and 15, I get that. I would also probably put the Wolves ahead of the Spurs at this point, pretty comfortably, especially given, no more DeMar DeRozan. Keldon Johnson's great, but is the rest of that roster great? Like, are the Spurs really going to be better than the Wolves? I get that they've got a great coach, but putting the Wolves 13th is just beyond me. I don't know how, because again, you look at last year's record, and yeah, they were bad last year, but as Wolves fans are well aware, their record with Russell and Towns in the lineup is 500 or better consistently over the past couple of years. And so to just assume that they're going to take this, I get not a nosedive, but basically plateau with a healthy roster that's arguably better, in my opinion, better than it was, even if it wasn't a splashy offseason to this point. I just don't understand putting them at 13th. I just think it's crazy. So, and I should say there's some commentary in here about it. And I'll just read the paragraph that this was written by Royce Young, who's a longtime Thunder reporter for ESPN, done some other stuff there. And he says, The Wolves are intriguing in that they could be the next version of the Suns, a meandering franchise, which is maybe one of the kinder ways to describe the Timberwolves franchise. With a young superstar seemingly on the verge, the offseason didn't see any major retooling, but with Anthony Edwards' exciting rookie season and the pieces in place, the Wolves are opportunistic and looking to find their veteran that leads a jump. I think that's actually a pretty fair synopsis, right? If you're going to write two sentences about the Wolves offseason, and I've talked about the similarities between the Wolves and Suns. I actually think the Wolves and Hawks is maybe a better comparison. The jump that the Hawks made last year versus the jump the Suns made. I mean, the Suns added Chris Paul. That was a major addition. And they did it. Jay Crowder was pretty significant, a starter for them. The Wolves haven't done anything to that level. The Hawks last year obviously made some notable deals, but their acquisitions didn't turn out to be major, right? Rajon Rondo was gone by the end of the year. Chris Dunn was injured, barely in the rotation. That roster changed a little, but I guess Danilo Gallinari was a pretty big one. But really, it was John Collins and Trae Young improving. DeAndre Hunter was hurt, I guess, but Kevin Huerter got better. They had some other guys improve. I think the Wolves situation is actually more parallel, or I guess it's a better parallel to the Hawks than it would be to the Suns. But that's the blueprint, right? It's Towns healthy, improving defensively. It's Russell healthy, playing with Towns. It's Edwards playing like he did in March, April, May of last year. That right there is a 500 team. I mean, it just is. And then you add the defense I talked about earlier of Beverly, Okogie, emerging McDaniels, Vanderbilt getting minutes, Bolmaro eventually being part of this rotation. I just don't see how you look at this roster and say, oh yeah, they're definitely 20 games below 500. I just don't see it. I think the short-sightedness and the national perspective of, oh, this team was bad last year, they'll be bad again this year, it's just really lazy, I think is kind of where we're at this point in the offseason. So don't worry, there will be more of this. I'm sure we'll see plenty more predictions that are along these lines here in the next few weeks. And I will call out every one of them, and depending on the analysis, kind of dig in a little bit deeper. But just know that this roster is not a 31-51 roster. It is not. It's not going to win a championship. I'm sorry, it's not. But it's also not 31-51. That's just not a very likely outcome this year. Again, given relative health, which we have to assume if we're doing these kinds of projections. Okay. That's all for the show today. We'll be back, of course, next week. One more week of Monday, Wednesday, Friday shows before, believe it or not, training camp starts the week after next. We'll be back to daily shows Monday through Friday, and plenty, of course, to talk about once training camp gets going. So be sure, if you're not already following or subscribed to Locked On Wolves, that you do that anywhere you listen to podcasts. That, of course, includes Apple as well as Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Odyssey, and of course YouTube. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder that Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. And then a final reminder also on this Friday, if you're not already following or subscribed to Locked On NBA, you can do that wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can also find Locked On NBA. On Fridays, it's hosted by Nick Angstad of Locked On Mavericks and Adam Morris of Locked On Nuggets. They power rank the week that was in the NBA. Follow the Locked On NBA podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. It's also on YouTube as well. So be sure to check that out. All right. That's all I have for you today. Have a fantastic weekend. I'll be back on Monday. Once again, my name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast. We'll catch you next time.